Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 2020 Annual Meeting of Stockholders of Philippine Realty and Holdings Corporation. Allow me to call the Corporate Secretary, Attorney Rex P. Bonifacio, to do the honor of introducing the members of the Board of Directors.
Thank you. The following are the members of the Board of Directors of Philippine Realty and Holdings Corporation. Mr. Gerardo Domenico Antonio V. Lanusa. Mr. Lanusa is the chairman of the board and at the same time the chairman of the executive committee. He is also a member of Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee, Procurement Committee, and Retirement Plan Committee. Mr. Renato G. Nunez. Mr. Nunez is the vice chairman of the board and an independent director. He is also the chairman of Audit Committee and Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee. Mr. Nunez is likewise a member of the Executive Committee, Board Risk Oversight Committee, and Related Party Transactions Committee. Mr. Gerardo O. Lanusa Jr., Chairman Emeritus and member of Executive Committee and Procurement Committee. Mr. Antonio O. Olves, Vice Chairman Emeritus. Mr. Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr. Mr. Del Rosario is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the company, and at the same time the Chairman of Retirement Plan Committee, Management Committee, and Project Committee. He is also a member of the Executive Committee, Board Risk Oversight Committee, and Related Party Transactions Committee. Mr. Edmundo C. Medrano. Mr. Medrano is the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer, and Treasurer of the company. He is also a member of Board Risk Oversight Committee, Retirement Plan Committee, Management Committee, and Project Committee. Mr. Gregory Young. Mr. Amador C. Bacani. Mr. Bacani is a member of the Executive Committee, Audit Committee, Procurement Committee, and Retirement Plan Committee. Mr. Andrew C. Nang. Mr. Nang is a member of Procurement Committee. Mr. Alfonso Martin E. Esmendi. Mr. Esmendi is an independent director and chairman of Board Risk Oversight Committee and Related Party Transactions Committee. He is also a member of Audit Committee and Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee. And last but not the least, Mr. Jomark O. Arolado. Mr. Arolado is an independent director and chairman of Procurement Committee. He is also a member of Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee, Board Risk Oversight Committee, and Related Party Transactions Committee. Also joining us are the key officers of the company and guests. Their names are flashed on your screen.
And now to preside the meeting, ladies and gentlemen, our chairman, Mr. Gerardo Domenico Antonio V. Lanusa.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting will now come to order. Mr. Corporate Secretary, have notices been duly sent as required by the bylaws?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. A copy of the notice of today's meeting was published in print and online format in Business Mirror and Business World on July 28 and 29, 2020, in compliance with the notice dated April 20, 2020 of the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Mr. Corporate Secretary, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Based on the record of attendance of today's meeting, there are represented in this meeting by proxy and by voting in absentia 3,630,841,216 shares, representing 73.76%, or more than one-third of the corporation's total outstanding shares of 4,922,324,907. Therefore, there is a quorum and this meeting may proceed.
Our Corporate Secretary, Attorney Rex Bonifacio, will now share the rules of conduct and the voting procedures for this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rules of conduct and procedures for this meeting are set forth in the definitive information statement. I would just like, Mr. Chairman, to highlight some points to our shareholders who are joining us in our live webcast. Stockholders who registered and voted through remote communication or in absentia using the online voting system on or before 5 p.m. of August 15, 2020 shall be deemed present for purposes of quorum. All questions, comments, or clarifications shall be addressed to the chairman and shall be entertained, read, and responded to during the question and answer or after the other matters. The moderator of the meeting shall read the questions, which shall be responded to by whoever the chairman of the meeting may appoint or designate from the members of the board or officers of the corporations. Stockholders may send their questions, comments, or clarifications on matter related to the items in the agenda through the comment box found below the link www.PhilRealty2020asm.com. The company will endeavor to answer questions, comments, or clarification not answered or responded to during the question and answer for whatever reason via email. The meeting is being recorded in compliance with the guidelines for online meeting issued by the SEC, and by joining our live webcast, stockholders are deemed to have given their consent thereto. In compliance with the revised Corporation Code of the Philippines, I will be reporting the voting results after the discussion of each item in the agenda, and the same shall be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. That is all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the first item in the agenda is the reading and approval of the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting held on June 7, 2019. A copy of the minutes of the last year's annual meeting is posted in the company's website.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully move that the reading of the minutes of the annual stockholders meeting held on June 7, 2019 be dispensed with, and that the same be approved, ratified, and confirmed. I am Joey Jimena, a proxy holder.
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion. I am Joseph Ganapi, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that the reading of the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting of the corporation has been moved and seconded that the reading of the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting of the corporation held on June 7, 2019 be dispensed with, and that the same be approved, ratified, and confirmed. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we know the voting result for this item in the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, 3,630,841,216 shares, or 100% of the shares represented in this meeting, were cast in favor of approving the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting held on June 7, 2019.
Are there any objections? There being none, the motion is carried. The next item in the agenda is the presentation of the annual report of the Board of Directors. We are pleased to report that 2019 proved to be a fruitful period, as we've gained more than we did the previous year. We have achieved various milestones that have paved the way for your company to explore new and exciting opportunities to further grow your asset value and be of greater service to you. With that in mind, allow me to call on our President and CEO, Mr. Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr., to present to us the state of your company in the past year, as well as present and future ventures.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our stockholders, members of the Board of Directors, my colleagues at PhilRealty, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am pleased to report to you today the significant and tangible gains your company, Philippine Realty and Holdings Corporation, had achieved in 2019. These gains are in step with the medium and long-term plans that we set out 2 years ago. Underlying these plans is to make substantial progress in strengthening our core business in real estate development and management, further enabling us to establish our footprint in the industry. The results that we have secured in 2019 provide the solid footing in that direction. While challenges posed by the 5 months business lockdown due to COVID-19 would change the hue and shade of the real estate industry moving forward from this year and beyond, allow me nevertheless to share with you a few highlights of the real estate industry last year. During the year up to the third quarter of 2019, the nationwide residential real estate price index surged 10.4% according to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Condominium units saw the strongest year-on-year price increase of 29.1% in quarter 3 of 2019 from a year earlier. Manila's prime residential market registered one of the highest growth rates globally in 2019, increasing by 6.5% in Knight Frank's Prime International Residential Index. Manila was 8th highest globally and 3rd highest in Asia. The growth in the prime residential market in Manila was driven by a tight supply of luxury and high-end properties, the increasing number of Filipino ultra-high net worth individuals, and the steady demand from foreign buyers. It was in this industry context that your company was able to perform positively in 2019. Allow me now to present to you the financial details of this performance. In 2019, your company posted a consolidated net income after tax of more than 485 million, a strong 19% increase compared to 391 million net income after tax reported in the same period in the previous year. This was mainly caused by the following. Our total revenues for the last year amounted to 1.88 billion, an increase of 64 million or 3% over the previous period. 1.07 billion or 57% of total revenues came from the sale of real estate, which increased by 65 million or by 6% in 2019. The sale of units at Sky Villas Tower accounted for a significant portion of this figure, augmented by the sale of units at Skyline Tower and at Icon Plaza located in Bonifacio Global City. Meanwhile, 810 million of total revenues was attributed to rent, management fees, interest gains, and revaluation of investment properties. This is a slight decrease of 1 million compared to the 12 months ended 31st December 2018. At year-end 2019, the total assets were at 6.19 billion compared to the previous year's 5.02 billion, an increase of 1.16 billion or a 19% uptick. The company's current ratio decreased from 4.15 to 1 to 2.91 to 1 from 2018 to 2019, mainly due to a combined increase in current liabilities and decrease in current assets. However, the current ratio of 2.91 to 1 is considered to still be quite healthy. Similarly, PhilRealty's debt-to-equity ratio remained good and conservative as the company's financial leverage marginally increased, closing at 0.57 to 1. The asset-to-equity ratio of the company also showed steadiness over time, as it improved from 1.45 in 2018, 1.57 to 1 in 2019. The steady performance of debt-to-equity ratios and asset-to-equity ratios of the company clearly demonstrates that our company's real estate business is currently being financed primarily by funds provided by its shareholders and a relatively small amount of debt. The performance of the company's book value per share has also been encouraging. It has been consistently improving from 0.74 per share to 0.84. Our net worth consequently increased to 3.93 billion, up by 464 million, or a 12% increase. All these positive implications in numbers are a result of your company's enhancements in its operations. Let me now share with you the highlights of our operations in 2019. The year saw your company focusing on the sale of the remaining 50 units of the total 165 apartments in Sky Villas Tower, selling 45 units and leaving only 5 units by year end. It also embarked on an upgrading of a number of Skyline units to the premier category, with 7 units completed during the year and 15 units slated to be ready for this year. We are also pleased to report that after 20 years, your company finally settled the case involving the penthouse units in Tektite West Tower and 74 parking spaces, thereby adding 3,295 square meters to its leasable space in Tektite Towers and to its recurring income generating portfolio. We have also been successful in securing a tax-free exchange ruling from the BIR on the asset for share exchange transaction involving 2 lots in BGC, totaling 3,200 square meters, valued at 2.256 billion. The transaction, once it is concluded this year, will increase your company's total assets by 2.256 billion, and our equity base also by the same amount. Consequently, this will further improve our debt-to-equity ratio to a very, very conservative level. Your company had also completed the architectural, structural, and interior design plans for an ultra-luxury residential project in one of the lots in BGC that your company acquired via the asset for share exchange previously mentioned, which it had hoped to start full construction by this year. However, COVID-19 has caused your management to decide to reconsider pursuing the project given the prevailing economic uncertainties. Nevertheless, the company shifted its focus to the planning and design of the remaining towers in its One Balete compound in New Manila, Quezon City. Naturally, these soon-to-launch towers will be the same premium quality as its successors, Skyline and Sky Villas. Doing what we do best, we will design these buildings to be elegant and to feature upscale architecture and interior design to include amenities and services that are meant to complement the lifestyle of our distinct clients. Given the magnitude of these plans, we are keenly cognizant of the need for a significant amount of financial resources to turn them into reality. In that regard, we are very heartened with the high level of trust and confidence that we have so far garnered from our principal shareholders as well as from the banking institutions that have supported us. God willing, as the pandemic subsides, we should be able to pick back up the momentum in generating more sales and leasing revenues. And as more banking and other investment partnerships are forged and strengthened, we are confident that we will be able to acquire the needed resources to get back on track to bring these plans to fruition. It's also our hope that by doing so, it will further reinforce the trust of our clients and stakeholders in our commitment to produce the best results and to increase values for them. As proven by our success in the past years, with strategic planning, precise and thoughtful use of resources, and the right balance of business acumen and foresight, guided by its board of directors, PhilRealty will be able to continue to deliver in its promise to further grow its business and to transform landscapes in the city, the metropolis, and beyond. Thank you and have a good afternoon. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the chair will now entertain a motion for the approval of the annual report and the audited financial statements of the year ended 2019.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the annual report and the audited financial statements for the year ended 2019 be approved, ratified, and confirmed. I am Don Escolin, a proxy holder.
Mr. Chairman, I second the motion. I am King Anthony Tan, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that the annual report and audited financial statements for the year ended 2019 be approved, ratified, and confirmed. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we know the voting results for this item in the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, 3,630,841,216 shares, or 100% of the shares represented in this meeting, were cast in favor of approving the annual report and the audited financial statements for the year ended December 31, 2019.
Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The motion is carried. We shall now proceed with the ratification of all acts and proceedings of the Board of Directors, Board Committees, and Officers since the last annual stockholders meeting held on the 7th of June, 2019.
Mr. Chairman, I move that all acts, resolutions, contracts, deeds, and proceedings of the Board of Directors, Board Committees, and Officers of the Corporation since the last annual stockholders meeting held on June 7, 2019, and up to today's meeting, as set forth or reported in the minutes of the meetings of the Board of Directors and its committees, and in the report submitted by the Corporation to the SEC, PSE, and other regulatory bodies, and all acts and proceedings performed or taken pursuant thereto, be approved, ratified, and confirmed. I am Joseph Ganapin, a proxy holder.
I second the motion. I am Don Escolin, proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that all acts, contracts, deeds, and proceedings of the Board of Directors, Board Committees, and Officers of the Corporation since the last annual stockholders meeting and up to today's meeting, as set forth or reported in the minutes of the meetings of the Board of Directors and its committees, and in the report submitted by the Corporation to the SEC, PSE, and other regulatory bodies, and all acts, proceedings performed or taken pursuant thereto, be approved, ratified, and confirmed. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we know the voting results for this item in the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, 3,630,841,216 shares, or 100% of the shares represented in this meeting, were cast in favor of the approval and ratification of all acts, contracts, deeds, and proceedings of the Board of Directors, Board Committees, and Officers of the Corporation since the last annual stockholders meeting and up to today's meeting.
Are there any objections? There being none, the motion is carried. The next item on the agenda is the election of the members of the Board of Directors for the ensuing year. The following persons who constitute the final list of candidates presented to and approved by the Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee have been nominated to the board for the ensuing year and have accepted their respective nominations. Gerardo Domenico Antonio Lanuza, Renato G. Nunez, Gerardo O. Lanuza Jr., Antonio O. Olbes, Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr., Edmundo C. Medrano, Gregory G. Yang, Andrew C. Nang, Amador C. Bacani, Joe Mark O. Arellado, and Alfonso Martin Aismendi. Mr. Alfonso Martin E. Aismendi, Mr. Renato G. Nunez, and Mr. Joe Mark O. Arellado were nominated as the 3 independent directors to be elected in this meeting in accordance with the rules on nomination and election of independent directors and the amended manual on corporate governance of the corporation. They were nominated by minority stockholders Eduardo Lucero, Alfredo Alfonso, and Patricia Sandejas, respectively.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully nominate the following as members of the Board of Directors to serve as such for 1 year, beginning today until their successors have been duly elected and qualified. Mr. Gerardo Domenico Antonio Villanuza, Mr. Gerardo O. Lanuza Jr., Mr. Antonio O. Olbes, Mr. Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr., Mr. Edmundo C. Medrano, Mr. Gregory G. Yang, Mr. Andrew C. Nang, Mr. Amador C. Bacani, Mr. Renato G. Nunez as Independent Director, Mr. Joe Mark O. Arellado as Independent Director, and Mr. Alfonso Martin E. Aismendi as Independent Director. I am King Anthony Tan, a proxy holder.
I second the nomination. I am Joey Jimena, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that the following nominees be elected as directors of the corporation to serve as such, beginning today until their successors are duly elected and qualified. Gerardo Domenico Antonio Lanuza, Gerardo O. Lanuza Jr., Antonio O. Albes, Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr., Edmundo C. Medrano, Gregory G. Yang, Andrew C. Nang, Amador C. Bacani, Renato G. Nunez as Independent Director, Joe Mark O. Arellado as Independent Director, and Alfonso Martin E. Aismendi as Independent Director. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we have the results of the election?
Mr. Chairman, I am pleased to report that each of the 11 nominees has received 3,630,841,216 votes, or 100% of the shares represented in this meeting. I therefore certify, Mr. Chairman, that all the 11 nominees are duly elected in the board.
Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The motion is carried. On behalf of the members of the previous board of directors and the members of the new board of directors, allow me to express our gratitude for the trust and confidence that the stockholders have reposed upon us. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the amendments to the bylaws of the corporation. Mr. Corporate Secretary, will you please enlighten our shareholders on this item in the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, a new law was passed recently amending the Corporation Code of the Philippines. This new law, Republic Act 11232, otherwise known as the Revised Corporation Code of the Philippines, has introduced new as well as amended provisions which all registered corporations have to comply. In line with the Revised Corporation Code and the various issuances of the SEC pertaining to COVID-19, as well as the adoption by the corporations of its Manual on Corporate Governance and the creation of various committees in the board, Philippine Realty and Holding Corporations, through its board of directors, had approved several amendments to the bylaws of the corporation during its regular meeting held on July 21, 2020 through video conference. To summarize, the following are the amendments that were approved by the board subject to the approval and ratification of the stockholders in this meeting. Article 1, Section 3, adding electronic mail and other methods allowed by the SEC as additional methods in giving notice of annual meeting to stockholders, and changing the period of giving notices from 1 week to at least 21 days prior to the date of the annual meeting. Article 1, Section 6, adding remote modes of communications as additional modes by which a stockholder or a director may attend meetings and cast their votes. Article 2, Section 3, as to the frequency of board meetings, the word regular was changed to monthly. On the attendance, participation, and voting of directors in board meetings, directors are now allowed under the new amendments to attend, participate, and vote in board meetings through remote communication such as video conferencing, teleconferencing, or other alternative modes of communication. Article 2, Section 5, creation of a corporate governance and nomination committee to replace the existing nomination committee and the incorporation of the functions of the nomination committee under the corporate governance and nomination committee. Also under Article 2, two new sections were added to be known as Section 9 with title Risk Oversight Committee and Section 10 with title Related Party Transactions Committee. That is all, Mr. Chairman.
The chair will now entertain a motion for the approval of the amendments to the bylaws.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the amendments to Sections 3 and 6 of Article 1, Section 5 of Article 2, and the inclusion of new Sections 9 and 10 under Article 2 of the bylaws of the corporation, as provided in the definitive information statement and in the notice of annual stockholders meeting, and all actions or proceedings taken by the board of directors or officers of the corporation pursuant thereto, be approved, ratified, and confirmed.
I second the motion. I am Joseph Benapin, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that the amendments to Section 3 and 6 of Article 1, Section 5 of Article 2, and the inclusion of the new Sections 9 and 10 under Article 2 of the bylaws of the corporation as provided in the definitive information statement and in the notice of annual stockholders meeting, and all actions or proceedings taken by the board of directors or officers of the corporation pursuant thereto be approved, ratified, and confirmed. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we have the voting results for this item in the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, 3,630,841,216 shares, or 100% of the shares represented in this meeting, were cast in favor of approving the amendments to Section 3 and 6 of Article 1, Section 5 of Article 2, and the inclusion of new Sections 9 and 10 under Article 2 of the bylaws of the corporation.
Are there any objections? There being none, the motion is carried. The next item in our agenda is the appointment of the external auditor of the corporation for the ensuing year.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully move that the Maceda Valencia and Company be appointed as the external auditor of the corporation for the ensuing year, subject to such terms and conditions as may be imposed by the Board of Directors. I am Don Esculin, proxy holder.
I second the motion. I am King Anthony Tan, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that Maceda Valencia and Company be appointed as the external auditor of the corporation for the ensuing year, subject to such terms and conditions as may be imposed by the Board of Directors. Mr. Corporate Secretary, may we have the voting results for this item in the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, 3,630,841,216 shares, or 100% of the shares represented in this meeting, were cast in favor of appointing Maceda Valencia and Company as the external auditor of the corporation for the ensuing year.
Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The motion is carried. Mr. Corporate Secretary, are there other matters that require consideration by the shareholders?
There is none, Mr. Chairman.
There being none, we can now address the questions, comments, and clarifications from the stockholders. Our Senior Manager and Business Development Officer, Mr. Rosano Santos, will read the questions, comments, or clarifications together with the names of the stockholders who sent them.
Mr. Chairman.
Rosano.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. The first question is from Mr. Jonathan Sandejas, proxy. The question reads, how is PhilRealty affected by the pandemic, and how is the company coping or addressing the issues?
May I request our President and CEO, Mr. Alfredo S. Del Rosario Jr., to respond to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As may be the case with the other companies in the country, the safety and well-being of our employees and stakeholders are of utmost importance. And so we have implemented since March of this year a work-from-home setup and have kept a skeleton working force in our office in Juan Balete, New Manila, Quezon City. This ensures that excuse me, operations of our business is continued while lessening exposure to the virus. Excuse me.
Oh, thank you for that answer, Mr. Del Rosario. We have another question, this time coming from the proxy of Ms. Patricia Sandejas. The question is, how do you foresee the business of PhilRealty for the rest of the year 2020 and ever for the next?
Thank you for the question. It's undeniable that the pandemic has caused significant adverse impact on the profit and loss statement of this year. The experience of being able to personally see our units has been hindered and sometimes even impossible with the quarantine, making it likewise harder and longer for our clients to make an acquisition. However, the company's balance sheet remains strong. We have built a steady foundation to keep the company moving towards profitable businesses in the years to come. And as I had mentioned in my address earlier, we are focusing on and already in the process of planning for the construction of 2 new towers in our One Balete compound.
Thank you very much, Mr. Del Rosario, for bringing light into the matter. Mr. Chairman, we have no more questions.
There being no other questions from the stockholders, the chair will now entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the meeting be adjourned. I am Joseph Ganapin, a proxy holder.
I second the motion. I am Joey Jimena, a proxy holder.
It has been moved and seconded that the meeting be adjourned. Are there any objections? There being none, this meeting is adjourned. We will be posting a link of the recorded meeting in our website at www.philrealty.com.ph. Stockholders may raise any issues, clarifications, and concerns on the meeting conducted by sending an email to corporatesecretary@philrealty.com.ph. Thank you for joining us.